Peace and love, peace and love. This is author P.E. McCallum, author of the book NGR, What Does It Mean? Welcome to this NGR Exposed platform, better known as Pow Shadowz the General. What's up, family? And I'm here today on this NGR Exposed platform with a treat for everybody. You know, we got the elder in the building. This good brother sitting next to me, his name is Lamar Wilson, and I thought it was only right to have him on the platform today because, you know, on my platform, I deal with everything surrounding the N-word, you know, the word nigga. We talk about the history, the origins of the word, the etymology, where it comes from, but also social issues around the word, the N-word in hip-hop, the N-word in comedy, the N-word in art. And that's where I think you come in because you are such a historical figure to Nashville and an integral part to the Nashville civil rights scene here. You have a lot of experience and many great stories to tell about that. And I just wanted to have you on to get your experience with the N-word. Okay. You know, so with no further ado, could you let the people know a little bit about yourself and who you are? Lamar Wilson, the elder.
Lamar Wilson, born in Nashville, Tennessee. Attended several schools here, including St. Vincent, Cumberland High School, where we integrated in the mid-'60s, and also Father Ryan High School when it was on Ellison Place. Went to college at Bowie State, Morehouse College. Went back to D.C. Mom and I opened up an art gallery on Capitol Hill called Dole Gallery, which took for Dorothy Lamar, Andre, and Edwin, me, her, and the children's name. From there, went back to Atlanta to start Fine Arts of Atlanta, which was the most successful local art store in the underground land where we saw thousands of people a day. From there, I went to Morris Brown College, where I was a curator and program coordinator for the art gallery there, Ruth Hall Hodges Art Gallery, Dr. Lee Ransall, Fred Jono, and others. Also, Louis Delasade, who was a nationally known, internationally known artist. Back to D.C. with Banneker Douglas, now Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum, which was, I was the curator and program coordinator there and did several art shows, historical markers, projects all over the country. So back in Nashville here, I came back to take care of Mom when she was 90. She made it to 99 and a half, and that was in 2020. And now I'm just kind of doing stuff in the community, getting involved, getting in wherever I can to lend a hand with my knowledge and expertise while I'm here with Pow today.
Great, great. Yes, yes. So, indeed, fam, I want to say rest in paradise to your mother.
Thank you.
You know, we always want to give respect to the elders. Mm-hmm. So you're from that art scene, and you know the thing about Nashville, right, is that I think a lot of people overlook Nashville when it comes to art,
right?
When it comes to civil rights history, not knowing that, you know, the Freedom Riders. You know, I remember when I was doing some research on my Freedom Riders music project, and I learned that, you know, the Freedom Riders, many of them came from Nashville.
Yeah.
The civil rights movement, a lot of those early protests and sit-ins, some significant ones was held here. So you were a part of some of these events and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some events that you were a part of here in Nashville and what was going on?
Well, first of all, we moved into a subdivision called Wendover Drive, which was the first African-American suburb.
What was it called?
Wendover Drive, off Ashland City Highway. So I was neighbors with many legendary people: Matthew Walker, D.B. Todd, Hanson, A.P. Johnson, Robert Anderson, Robert Christman, R&R Liquor Store, Isaac Miller, who ended up becoming president of Bennett University, Jack Talk, the head of radiology. So I grew up with a lot of great mentors as a child, including my own dad, who was one of the first African Americans to work downtown in a professional capacity as a photographer for Baby Studios. And I very much remember what it was like doing segregation. As a matter of fact, I thought we did better in segregation when Jefferson Street was a big deal. I remember when the ride started at Fisk University. Interesting time because Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King both spoke at Vanderbilt for a symposium that weekend. And the incident happened with students at Fisk, and it carried over to TSU the next day when Stokely spoke at TSU in Kingsville Garden. And I was right in there with the bricks, and me and my good buddy Joe Gillum was side by side tossing bricks at people coming down Centennial Boulevard. My parents did not allow me per se to get involved in the protests because I was 13, 14 years old, and they felt that was a bigger fight. Our fight was more so for good education, which we had a better education. It's been talked about. Washington Junior High, where my mother taught, the premier junior high schools in the country. Coach Tisdale had a winning percentage of 925. He lost 16 games in 50 years of coaching. Don Q. Pullen had a symphony band, a marching band, orchestra. So for me, the greatness was just being around people who were great. As I always say, Nashville has had so many people who came through Nashville and who are from Nashville, probably more than any other city, including Atlanta, because we have the medical school here, we have the HBCU, land grant, Tennessee State, we have HBCU, private institution, Fisk, and also the American Baptist College out there in Whites Creek Pike. So just knowing people and being a part of people who were involved. Matthew Walker Jr. was one of the original Freedom Riders who was my neighbor. Rip Patton, Diane Lane, John Lewis, C.T. Vivian. I knew C.T. Vivian very well when I was in Atlanta at Morehouse College. So for me, it was more so just being around these conversations, listening to people talk about things, and just being part of a very vibrant Black community. North Nashville 37208 was the most popular place for people to live in the country because of so much intelligent Black people with the colleges and universities. These were all very smart people who were here. And when they went about civil rights, they went about it very tactical. We had James Lawson, who was at Vanderbilt, who was eventually...
Whom I've met.
Who you've met, who now has a high school named after him out in Bellevue. Then there was Jim Lawson, president of Fisk. We had two Jim Lawsons. We had Jim Lawson, Dr. Jim Lawson, president of Fisk, and Dr. Jim Lawson, a student at Vanderbilt, who pretty much designed and developed most of these strategies for peaceful protests and demonstrations. So part of that, and then we moved to D.C. when I was 16 years old and picked right up where I left off because you had the Congressional Black Caucus was just starting. So I knew Perry Mitchell real well. I knew several of those guys, and then Black business people. Just DC was in the 60s. Where you could ask anybody; they'll tell you it was the place to be. So when my mom asked me, I want to come back home and go to school, I said, absolutely not. I'm staying here with you guys.
So let me ask you. So when was the first time you recall ever hearing the N-word or being called the N-word?
At Cumberland High School. We integrated Cumberland.
You remember the year?
1966. Walking down the hall, and if someone called, we had made a decision because I was going to St. Vincent. Actually went to Washington, and we heard about the integration starting. We all decided because we all had gone to other schools, and we were going to go to Cumberland because the John Driver, who was a councilman, his family, his children had gone there elementary school, and they had been abused by gangs of whites, and we was like, okay, we gonna get in the fight. Here we are, we 14, 15 years old, we talking about getting in the fight. And so we went in there, and I got called the N-word, and the books went down, the hands went up. And we did that for about 2 weeks. And then my buddy Matt Woods, whose father looked like Superman, with muscles bulging out of his arms and calves sticking out, Matt got into a fight. So Mr. Woods went down and talked to the principal, the assistant principal. He said, look, these kids came here to go to school, not to do all this fighting. If I hear one more fight with these kids, I'm coming down here, pardon my French, I'm whipping your ass, I'm whipping your... He said, there's two white men, two professional white men. Like, what'd you say? He said, you heard what I said. I'm coming down here, I'm whipping your ass, I'm whipping your ass too. I'm tired of this. I'm going to hear nothing about no more fights, no more. So they called the assembly the next day. And
what city is this?
This was here in Nashville, right there where I.T. Cresswell is. That was Cumberland High School. And then, of course, sports is always a great metaphor. We started playing football and basketball with these guys. They kind of lightened up a little bit. But there were several fist fights in the first 2 or 3 weeks. We just want to
now, during these fist fights I'm assuming between the Black and Indigenous students and the
right.
white students.
We were junior high fighting senior high people.
Okay. Now, was there a lot of N-word being thrown around during these fights?
Yeah.
Hey, nigga,
That's what started it. For us to hear that word, books went down, hands went up.
And
we weren't no violent. We were middle class. We were suburban kids. We were suburban kids. We weren't no thugs or inner city. We knew that we had to defend our history, and we weren't gonna allow people to call us that name. can't get away with it. So that for me was the early part of being called an N-word.
Now, in my book, right, you, which you're a supporter of, and I really always thank and appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a supporter of my book since day one. NGR, What Does It Mean? An expose on the N-word from a hip hop perspective, available on Amazon,
right,
in paperback, audiobook, and Kindle. You've been a big supporter. And in my book, I talk about how the N-word originally came from NGR. Right, and Arthur E.A. Wallace Budge in his book, An Egyptian Hieroglyphic Dictionary, lists over 14 definitions of the N-word, and so we find that it was used among Africans to mean something great.
Right.
It meant deity, god or goddess. Right. In ancient Ethiopia, you had the negus, the word negus,
right,
which is an ancient Ge'ez word, which means monarch, ruler, right, emperor. But then we know that it was translated by the Europeans to Niger. Which just means black, and then eventually the extra G was put on an Nigger, which today is the most offensive word in the English language, and it's just a word that they use just to mean something totally degrading, has nothing to do with deity, so it's been taken originally out of its context.
Right.
Now you hearing something like that, and me saying something like that, and then you having the experience with the word, do you feel that the N-word is something that is justifiable for our young men to be and women to be using? Say, for instance, like in my arena of hip hop, is it are we justified in using that word? Are we okay to be using that word as a term of endearment, or should we not?
Yeah, I'm gonna take what would be considered more so unpopular stance, but I think it's okay, because as you said, the word has power. The last of the line of the Negas from Ethiopia was Haile Selassie, who was part of the Negas tribe.
That's right.
So they took a word and flipped it like they did most of our history, made it something negative. But, when young people are being creative and being artistic, they have a right to use whatever words they want to use to be. I'm never going to stand in front of anybody and say, stop, you can't do that. I've had people who stopped me from, using the N-word, and I respect them. I wouldn't say it around there. But, I might drop an N-bomb every now and then. This was something that happened one time at a concert in Atlanta. Lil Jon had a song called Nigga What? What Nigga What? That was a song. In the crowd was high school white kids and HBCU, Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, Morris Brown, black kids. So he's singing the song, right? So we're all in the crowd together, right? And so when he said, nigga, what? The white kids were, what? What? And the black kids, I looked at them like, I wish you would. They would not say that word. So you're right. The word does have power. As long as the word has power, and they know that when they use it, something bad might happen, depending on who you're around. So it does have power. And I lived in Nashville, lived in DC, lived in Atlanta for most of my life, 20 years in pretty much most cities. And in Nashville, when I hear people use the word, it comes from a place of deep anger. Like they drag it out, And that to me is offensive because they're usually saying it when they're not happy with somebody.
Right. Like that, hey, I can't stand that nigga.
That nigga. It was one guy named Lee Wayne. Bless his heart, Lee Wayne still living there. He was taking about 30 seconds. He was taking so long when the guys on the corner. So, but I think that we've come to a point now where we have bigger fights to deal with. If someone calls us the N-word, you just maybe call them a cracker and just keep it moving. Or don't say nothing, because to not say nothing is powerful too. Because you're letting them know that you can't hurt me with that word no more. But at the time in the 60s and 70s when we were flipping the script, I like to think the 70s was a generation where the script got flipped.
Right.
The 60s was the initial protest, and the 70s we like put our foot down. We're not having no more. And that's when crack came in the 80s. We said we got to find another way to dumb these people down. And the drugs got more sophisticated, got more potent, more powerful. And of course, in the 90s, things picked back up again. It's almost like a 10-year, every decade, it's like an up and a down of how we feel.
So, yeah, it is. I noticed that, and I talk about that, how the N-word is fluid in our community. Like at some points, and we go back and forth about using it. Like, sometimes we feel like, yeah, it's fine to use as a term of endearment. At other times, we feel like, no, let's do away with it.
Right.
Like I talk about in the book, there's been 2 mock funerals for the N-word in our country. There's one in Detroit,
right,
one in Houston, where we took the N-word and we buried the N-word in effigy. We put it in a coffin and we buried it. You know what I'm saying? As this community. It was filmed, it was on TV. I researched this, like I said, it's all in the book. And to me, that says a lot.
Right.
That says a lot about our overall sentiment, and particularly from the elders. I really appreciate your objective perspective as an elder using the N-word, because how you came with that. I'm gonna come different. I don't necessarily mind. You had an open mind. So to us who use it in hip hop, that's kind of our perspective. We have an open mind about it. We understand its tumultuous history. Now, because I've written the book on the N-word, we understand that it came from Africans, that originally started among Africans, among Black and indigenous people in Africa as a term of greatness. You know what I'm saying? That's how it began. And it was translated to become something horrific and demeaning over time. But we didn't know that part until like this kind of information that's like in my book. But we did know about how they used it during slavery, how they used it during Jim Crow, and how they continue to use it as a term to degrade us today. And we do know that we use it as a term of endearment. And those are like the hip hop.
ER and AR.
Yeah, or A, like A in the ER. Like nigga versus the ER. We know that. So in hip hop, we kind of accept it. We let people be themselves. And I think it's interesting that you kind of take that same position that we take in hip hop, just allowing people to be themselves. How do you feel about it? You have a right to use the word. If you're a Black and indigenous person, you've been called that word. So guess what? However you feel about that word is how you feel about that word. So if you feel like using it as a term of endearment, maybe go ahead. So I'll give you the last word on this. What would you have to say to our young people that's watching, the youth, about if about using the N-word? And let me be more specific. How should young people? What's your advice for how should young people react or respond when they're called the N-word by people of another race in a degrading way?
Well, first of all, there's been a new expression now called YN, which is a slick way of saying young nigger. So it's I guess when white people use the term, they're thinking they're getting away with something. Oh, look at those YNs over there. And they're like, laugh. So they're tricking us again. But I want to go to a specific example. Back in 2007, I took a job in New York working at SUNY Old Westbury, which is in Long Island, New York. And Latinos were calling each other, nigga. Look at this nigga that, and I'm from the South. So I go, whoa. What's going on? And most of the Black kids in New York are from Haiti, Dominican. They're not American. They were born overseas and they came here. So their interpretation of Black culture is not what yours and mine is, because we born and raised and grew up in this stuff. So the Black kids say, oh, Mr. Wilson, it's okay. I said, no, it's not. I said, because if your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father weren't Black, you cannot use that word around me and get away with it. I said, let me flip the script. The Latin kids. So what the Blacks start calling each other spics? How would you feel about that? I wouldn't like that. I said, bam, I made my point. Bam. So we allow other cultures to get away with, people because they think it's funny. That word comes from a deeper, darker place that can never ever be really fully understood. Like I said, in the 70s, it came out, we came up with the fist, we came out with the fist, and that's how we dealt with it. Then we started playing ball together and realized we were better athletes than they were. Says, we're going to leave these people alone and let them play ball. And of course, we started winning football, basketball games, such and such, the whole thing. But I go back to even when Paul Douglas spoke at his mom's celebration of life about when Father Ryan had a very good team. He played Peabody, which is now called Nashville School for whatever, university school, which is, rich people. And they were using derogatory terms towards Paul and Willie and McKay in the basketball game. Of course, they beat their butts, beat the brakes off of them. But the next time they played at Father Ryan, people at Father Ryan school, Father Ryan, like most Catholic schools in 1954 integrated with the federal court case. That's why it was important when they had the agreement between Brian and Pearl. That was such important. But to the young people, I say this. Swearing, even swearing at all, it shows a lack of sophistication in not being able to use proper King's English to explain yourself. People curse as a shortcut to getting their point across. So, F-bomb now is the most popular word in the English language. I saw Chuck Schumer talking the other day, using the F word. So I think try to be more professional in your approach, particularly when you're talking in a mixed audience, and not use words that are derogatory, because when people say those words, it pings, it hits a different way. So my advice to young people, it's okay when you're around your fellow buddies and friends and talking about it, but when you're in mixed company, try to be more professional and try to be more understanding that this word hurts and hits people differently, and it is the most popular word in the English language, and we need to think about that and use it in a positive way and not a negative way.
Awesome, thank you for that.
Yeah.
According to dictionary.com, I think it is, the English word is considered the most offensive word in the English language. The N-word, the most offensive word in the English language. Thank you again, brother, for Lamar Wilson. Thanks for coming on this NGR Exposed platform. Y'all stay tuned for the next video. We'll see y'all next time.
Glad to be here.
Salute.
Salute.